Today I'm going to cover the most important things you need to do when starting your own pepper seeds. Welcome to the YouTube channel for Blue Ridge Pepper Patch. I am Christina and it is finally time. It's finally time to start planting seeds. So I'm going to show you today how I do it. There are many different ways, many different options you can choose from, but there are a few things that no matter what you do need to be consistent, and I'm going to go over some of those today while I show you two of my favorite methods for starting pepper seeds. So the first thing that is super important when starting your own pepper plants from seed is to use seeding starting mix. When pepper plants are first growing, they're very fragile in a way. You actually need something that doesn't have a lot of nutrients. You just want it to hold water and be able to get those roots started and get that first bit of growth from the plant. If you use something with a lot of nutrients, it can bring mold in too quickly, and then you end up losing your plants. So this is not the time to get some leftover soil from a pot in the yard. It's not the time to try to scrape soil out from underneath your turf. You do want to use a starting mix specifically for starting seeds. Some people make their own out of perlite and coconut coir. I haven't had much success with that. Maybe I'm just bad at mixing, I don't know. So I do buy a starting mix specifically for starting seeds. I've tried a couple of different brands and haven't really noticed a difference in germination rate through the different brands. So just whatever is at your local gardening store that is specifically for seed starting. So when it comes to what to start your seeds in, at that point, it kind of doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is that it's something that's clean and is not too large. You wouldn't get a 5-gallon bucket to put a seed in. You do want to start small. I prefer to start really small and use the kind of trays, but there are a lot of options. Some people use these peat pellets, and they come in as a little disc, and there's a little opening on one side, and when you add water they expand, and then you put one seed in there. Another option is biodegradable individual plant pots. These are fine. I kind of stick with the Jiffy brand for me because I have to do a lot, literally hundreds upon hundreds of seeds. It starts out as a kit, but what you get is your first set of biodegradable trays. And they're just a set of, there's 10 in each little thing, so for 50 total. Oh, there's actually nutrients, which I forgot about. So looking at this packet again, I'm not entirely sure what it's supposed to be for. Just mix with water and moisten seed starting medium. But it also doesn't give any information on the ingredients, just directions. So I personally wouldn't bother with this. I may have to do some more research, but I've never used this before and have always gotten good results without it. And they even give you a few little tags, but I'll talk about some options instead of those in a minute. Really all you do is set your trays in, and then it comes with a dome. And this is important once you get started because you want the soil to stay moist. You don't want it to dry out. And having a humidity dome makes that kind of foolproof. You'll remove it once your seeds start to come up, but to start, the humidity dome helps a lot. If you're not doing a lot, one of the other ways I like to start seeds is with upcycled materials. So obviously I have here a clamshell container from Takeout, which these are actually not recyclable in most municipalities. Double check your municipality or your recycling service, but you could use them to start seeds. Instead of using the peat pots, toilet paper tube, cut in half. And you're just going to arrange them. So I think I'm gonna be able to get 14 here. And once you fill them with soil, you instantly have your humidity dome. Pretty simple, upcycled materials. I've tried to do this with the whole toilet paper tube and like fold the bottom in like a coin wrapper. That actually makes it more difficult in my opinion, because then they don't want to sit level. But you'll be surprised that even though the bottom is open, your soil does kind of stay in there. One of the things that I don't recommend as far as a container for your seedlings is anything plastic. Now I know that's how you get them in the nursery store. It's how it's commonly done, but I don't seem to have as good results with pepper plants. I think part of it is, especially the super hots, can take months to germinate. And even though the roots are under the ground, they need air. They need access to the air. And the plastic just restricts that. Some people are perfectly fine doing that and don't have a problem. Some people will start their seedlings, especially if they're not doing many, straight in these 3-inch pots. I'm a transplanter. I like to start them in small and then move them up to big. Some people will even use like the red party cups, the plastic cups, instead of nursery cups. I mean, it's certainly up to you. It's just that the plastic is not my preferred. Another thing that I feel is pretty important when starting your own pepper plants from seeds that most people overlook is that they do benefit from what's called cold stratification, which is kind of not intuitive since they are technically a tropical species. And they don't need as much cold stratification as, say, like apple seeds. So basically that just means your seeds need to experience some cold. You need to simulate some amount of winter as though they were dropped in the fall, left on the ground, and then come up the next spring. For my plants, all I do is just leave them in the garage. Our garage probably gets to 40 or 50, 55, which is usually cold enough for pepper plants. I keep them in a tub and leave them in the garage. If you're watching this video and you've been keeping them in the house, one of the things you can do is just put them in the fridge for a couple days. Your seed starting mix is gonna come dry. It's not gonna come moist like you would buy potting soil. I personally like to empty out some of it out into a bowl. And you can see it's very dry, so we're gonna have to add water. I like to add boiling water for a few reasons. One, it absorbs faster, but then also you want your mix to be very sterile as possible. And the boiling water helps kill any bacteria that might have gotten in there. The one exception to that is if you buy a mix that has mycorrhiza in it. It's kind of a probiotic for roots, if you want to think of it that way. So you don't actually want to kill that. So that's like the only time that you would not want to use boiling water. But you don't have to use boiling water. I would use clean water. I wouldn't use water out of your rain barrel, again, because of the bacteria that might be in there. Totally fine on your garden, but you want to keep your planting mix as sterile as possible. Just have some boiling water from a tea kettle. Don't go too crazy at first. Pour a little bit and use whatever you have to mix it in. This is a good time for like an old aluminum roasting pan. I have this big mixing bowl I picked up at a thrift store. So add it a little bit at a time so you don't over wet it. It is not a huge problem if you do. It just means you're going to be squeezing water out later when you fill your plant pots. Once you feel like it's thoroughly wet, you can set it aside to cool while you prepare everything else. This is usually the first thing I start with. And the metal bowl helps it to dissipate faster rather than using like a 5-gallon bucket. And regardless of which method you're using, now you just take your wetted and cooled seeding mix and fill up those trays. Pat it down a little bit, but you're not trying to really smush it in there. You want to get this fine balance of, you don't want a lot of gaps, but you also don't want it packed in too tight. If it's messy, it doesn't matter. When you get towards the end, go back over with your fingers and make sure you've got them packed down in the right amount. If you're using the cut toilet paper method, one thing I would suggest is as you're filling up a tube. Just kind of hold the tube down with your fingers so it doesn't float away. Once the paper gets moist, it'll stay in place. They just need a little help in the beginning. Labeling your plants, especially if you're going to do multiple varieties or just a lot of seedlings, is so important. If you get a kit, a lot of times they come with these, but if you don't, people can use popsicle sticks. I prefer, this is one time that I prefer plastic because it doesn't rot and the Sharpie will stay longer. If you have old mini blinds, cut them up into strips. They're fantastic for this. Once you have your soil in place, it's just a matter of adding your seeds. I'm going to plant some herbs in this clamshell container, and I'm going to put 2 to 3 seeds per little toilet paper tube, just to account for any lack of germination, and also because herbs tend to be something that you group up when you plant them. Do not underestimate the importance of labeling. Use your tags, but since these are all the same, I'm just gonna Sharpie on here. Don't forget the date. In the Jiffy pot cell, I like to do 2 pepper seeds per cell, diagonal from each other. And that's partly because pepper seeds are notoriously kind of low germination rate when compared to like lettuce. And if you have fingernails, it kind of makes it easy. You don't need to really bury these. When they say like 1/4 of an inch, what I kind of do is just move the soil around and just pat it down. If you don't have fingernails, forceps like these help. They're better than tweezers, like beauty tweezers, because they don't grip as hard and the surface is a little bit longer. You could even kind of use the tips to nestle them in. Just make sure you don't go too deep, otherwise the seed may not sprout. If you have to pause what you're doing, the forceps are also great. You can set them where you stopped. The third most important thing when starting your own pepper plants from seeds is to consider where you got your seeds. Hot peppers are notorious for cross-pollinating with wind and pollinators. That's part of the reason why we have so many varieties, but that also means that if you want to make sure you have a habanero from season to season or a ghost pepper from season to season, you need to grow them in isolation and be careful about cross-pollinating. Now, that doesn't mean you can't grow things that perhaps you got at a seed swap or from someone who grew them open pollinated. It just means you might get a surprise whenever your plants come up. The thing with hot peppers and the cross-pollinating is that you think you're planting a habanero or a ghost pepper. It comes up, it looks like a ghost pepper, but you realize it's maybe not as hot as a ghost pepper. That may indicate that it gets cross-pollinated with a lower heat pepper, and while it looks and maybe even smells and tastes like a ghost pepper, it took on the capsaicin genetics of the lower heat pepper. So sometimes you see the cross visually, you actually see a difference in color or shape, but sometimes you don't, and that's important to remember when you're trying to get a high heat pepper like a ghost pepper or a 7-pot. So as I'm filling up the seed tray, I'll explain why I put 2 seeds per pot. This accounts for lower germination, but if both seeds do come up, using these biodegradable pots is really nice because then it's easy to peel away the outer pot and separate the seedlings. Some people don't like doing this. They don't like to handle their seedlings too much until they're bigger, but I've been doing it this way for years and haven't had any issues. The seedling can usually handle the stress if you're careful and you water it beforehand. I'm going to work on doing a second tray and then we'll head inside. Okay, so now that we're back inside, peppers being a full sun plant need full sun. And so you really can't get away with just some light coming in through a window. You really do need to have some sort of light source. So this is a light rack that we use because we do so many seedlings, but there are some other options that you can do as well. So if you're not quite ready to invest in a grow light rack, or you're only doing a few, thanks to LED technology, getting a grow light is not very difficult and not terribly expensive like it was before LED technology. They make bulbs that just fit a regular socket. There are quite a few different brands. I have two here. This one's on the cheaper end from Amazon, and it's roughly about 100 watt equivalent. And then the Sylvania is roughly a 200 watt equivalent. Just look for one that is a grow light. Because they're LED, they don't get terribly hot. You can see I have some pepper bonsai hanging out over here. And they just fit into a regular light socket, and I've used this kind of 3-post thing that I got at the thrift store to add some extra light into this corner. Another thing that we use is a seeding heat mat. So this helps to bring the temperature of the soil up. Many people will recommend it. Some people say, you don't need it. I think it's necessary, especially for the super hots. You might be able to get away without it if you're doing jalapenos, cayenne, the lower heats, but the super hots really do need some extra heat. And especially if you're starting these indoors in the winter, your house might be on the cooler side. Let's go ahead and set this on. So yeah, the other advantage is when you add the humidity dome, what happens is that heat from the heat mat helps to get some of the moisture flowing around above the surface of the plant so that you know that the surface is staying moist. You can use the heat mats with or without a thermostat. I think without a thermostat, the max temperature is nothing unreasonable. But I do choose to use these thermostats. They're basically, you plug the heat mat into the thermostat, plug your thermostat into your wall, and then there's a thermometer on a cord that you just put into the mat. And they set the different temperatures. So I'm actually going to set this to 80. If you hold, you can adjust your thermostat temperature. And we should be good to go. The thermostat is just one of these kind of little things on a cord. And I will generally try to nestle these between two of my trays. Let's see if we can get it in here. That way it's not disturbing my seedlings, but I still have a good idea of the temperature in there. And that's pretty much it. You don't have to, like perfectly seal the humidity dome. You still kind of want some airflow. And at this time, when you first plant your seedlings, I have the light on for the video, but you actually don't need the light until you start seeing above ground parts. There's our first 200 pepper seedlings of the year. So if you've gotten any good tips, I hope you'll like this video. If I missed something that you do that you think was really important, let a comment below. And when you subscribe, I'll be doing more of these videos throughout the growing season. This is just the beginning. Until next time, thank you for following me on this spicy adventure.